Hello, good morning, children. I would like to wish all the dear 10th class students a very happy Independence Day today. And coming to our class, in the previous assignment that I gave to you, I gave you a lengthy match the following. I gave you the chemical names and you have to identify the vitamins in the opposite set. So now let's just see it, keep that work assignment with you and just you tally what you have written. So the first vitamin was thiamine. So in that opposite match the following, it will be number 3, that is B1, thymine. The chemical name of B1 is thymine, and the second one, that was 1, and then the second one is ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid, and here ascorbic acid is the chemical name of vitamin C, and that number is 7 in your assignment that I have given to you. And then third one is cyanocobalamin. Cyanocobalamin. And the vitamin is vitamin B12, and that's in the number 6. So opposite to that you have to write number 6. And then let's go to the next number, that is 4. In the 4 you have the chemical name of another vitamin, that is retinol. So retinol is the chemical name of vitamin A, and that is in number 10. And coming to 5 we have the another chemical name, that is niacin. That is the chemical name of vitamin B3, and that's you see it in number 11. Now let's go to the next vitamin, that is riboflavin. And this is the chemical name of vitamin B2, which stands in number 1. That is riboflavin. That is chemical name of vitamin B2. Now let's go to the next vitamin. Next, 7th one, what I have given is calciferol. Here, this is the chemical name of vitamin D, which is present in the number 2. So that you have to put here. In number 2, you have calciferol. That is the chemical name of vitamin D. And now, 8th one. 8th one, we have the vitamin. Chemical name of the vitamin that I gave is phylloquinone. So this is the chemical name of vitamin K, and that is present in number 9, phylloquinone. And now let's go to the next vitamin. The chemical name I have given is pyridoxine. And this is the chemical name of vitamin B6. Vitamin B6, which is present in the number 8. We have it, vitamin B6. And the last match the following that I gave is the chemical name tocopherol. This is the chemical name of the vitamin E, and that vitamin E is present in the number 5. So you just check it out whether you have did the correct correction, because these are very important in case of bits wise also. They are very important. You have a tabular form in your textbook. The chemical names, their deficiency, what happens, what are the diseases that you come across when these vitamins are deficient. So you be thorough with that table which is present in the textbook. And then Coming to, if you take some of the experiments important experiments that were carried out of photosynthesis, the photochemical equation is very important. This also you have to learn it well. What is the photochemical equation of photosynthesis? 6CO2 plus 12H2O. 6CO2 plus 12H2O gives rise to C6H12O6. C6H12O6 plus 6H2O plus 6O2. So this is the photochemical equation of photosynthesis in the presence of light, and chlorophyll, So this is also very important, children. You have to write this several times. You just have to learn it. Here the overall in the equation you have so many information that it furnishes. Suppose what are the raw materials that are required for the process of photosynthesis. That is from here, from the equation you can clearly understand. We have the raw materials that are used. You know the meaning, what happens in photosynthesis. The simpler substances are transformed into their complex form by making use of energy from the sun, that is the solar energy. So here the requirements or the what are the reactants, what are the requirements of photosynthesis means, from here we can understand. For photosynthesis what is required, you must have carbon dioxide, water is necessary, sunlight, chlorophyll. These are the highly essential factors for photosynthesis to take place. And then after this, after the completion of the reaction, what will you have? What's the result of this chemical equation? The result of this chemical equation is the presence of starch, that is C6H12O6. C6H12O6. Then 6 molecules of water, and then oxygen. Oxygen which is released in the form of gas, it enters into the atmosphere. So this is the how we depend on both for food on the plants and for respiration. This is how the oxygen is let out into the atmosphere. So this is a very important equation which you should never forget. You should remember this equation. So that's why in the experiments on photosynthesis, that's how all these essential factors are proved in the photosynthesis experiments. You have seen in the photosynthesis experiment, first of all, if you take the for every photosynthesis experiment that has to be carried out, first of all, what do we need? We need a potted plant. That is our requirement to conduct experiments on a photosynthesis. First of all, we need a potted plant. Potted plant is highly necessary. And this potted plant, before conducting the experiment, what should be done to the potted plant? Yeah, very good. It has to be kept in dark for a few days. The plant has to be kept in dark. What's the purpose of keeping the plant in the darkness, in a dark room? What's the purpose? Good. So that the leaves are free of starch, for destarching the plant. So because we after photosynthesis has taken place, we test the leaves for the presence of starch. That is what you have seen in the beginning. Starch test that is carried out, making use of the chemical iodine. Iodine is used for the starch test. So prior to the conduction of experiments on photosynthesis, the plant that you are going to take, on which you are going to conduct the experiments on photosynthesis, it has to be kept in dark. What's the reason? This is another important question. Why should a plant be kept in dark for a few days before the conducting of experiments on photosynthesis? The answer is to destarch the plant. It has to be kept in dark before the conduction of experiments on photosynthesis. So the important experiments here, first of all, the experiment conducted by Joseph Priestley, that's also important, making use of two bell jar glass glasses, keeping candle, that also you have studied. And another important one is Moll's half-leaf experiment. Moll's half-leaf experiment. Why is this experiment conducted? This experiment is conducted to prove the essentiality or the importance of carbon dioxide in photosynthesis. Through this experiment, we'll prove that without carbon dioxide, the conduction of the process of photosynthesis is highly impossible. You know what we have done. For this, we have kept half of the leaf inside the glass jar and half of the leaf is exposed outside. And in the glass jar, name the chemical that is utilized. Very good, children. The chemical is potassium hydroxide. What's the purpose of putting potassium hydroxide in the glass jar? ఎందుకు పొటాషియం హైడ్రాక్సైడ్ ని గ్లాస్ జార్ లో పెడతారు? So that it absorbs any carbon dioxide that is present in the glass jar. Any carbon dioxide that is present in the glass jar is absorbed by potassium hydroxide. That's the purpose of putting potassium hydroxide. So you have seen when that leaf, the experimental leaf, when after the conduction, the whole setup is kept in sunlight for a few hours, and then the leaf is sent for iodine test, and then we can easily see that this part of the leaf that is inserted in the glass jar remains colorless, while the exposed part of the leaf it turns into bluish black color when iodine is poured on this part of the leaf. అంటే సగం లీఫ్ ఏమన్నా కలర్లెస్గా ఉంటుంది, కలర్ ఉండదు. ఎందుకంటే స్టార్చ్ టెస్ట్ చేసినప్పుడు ఐడిన్ కెమికల్ వేసినప్పుడు ఏమవుతుంది, ఇటంతా బ్లూయిష్ బ్లాక్గా తయారవుతుంది. ఎందుకు? ఇక్కడంతా ఏముంది? హియర్ యూ హ్యావ్ ద ప్రెసెన్స్ ఆఫ్ స్టార్చ్, proving that here what has taken place, photosynthesis took place in this part of the leaf because it has all the products that are available, all the requirements that are available. You have water, you have sunlight, you have carbon dioxide, you have chlorophyll, everything is present in this half of the leaf. Whereas this portion of the leaf, all the other requirements are present, are given to this part of the leaf in the glass jar. అందుకని గ్లాస్ జార్ ఎందుకు వాడతారు అని కూడా మిమ్మల్ని ఏమైనా క్వశ్చన్ అడగచ్చు. గ్లాస్ జార్ అలా కాకుండా ఏదైనా అల్యూమినియం టిన్ అట్లాంటివి ఎందుకు పెట్టరు అంటే దానికి ఆన్సర్ ఏంటి? బికాస్ ఇట్స్ అ గ్లాస్ జార్, దేర్ విల్ బి ద పెనిట్రేషన్ ఆఫ్ లైట్. ఇక్కడ మనం లైట్ని కూడా లైట్ కూడా అవైలబిలిటీ ఉంటుంది. అదే కనుక ఏదైనా మెటల్ టిన్ అట్లా తీసుకున్నామంటే లైట్ పడదు కదా. లైట్ కాదు మనకు కావాల్సింది. ఇక్కడ మనకు కావాల్సింది ఏంటి? వీఆర్ ప్రూవింగ్ ద ఇంపార్టెన్స్ ఆఫ్ carbon dioxide. So that's why we make use of the glass jar. There is light is available, chlorophyll is also present in the leaf, and water is available. The only limiting factor for this part of the leaf, for this half of the leaf, the only limiting factor is carbon dioxide. That is the limiting factor for this part of the leaf. So that's why this part of the leaf could not perform photosynthesis. Photosynthesis could not be performed by this part, by this portion of the leaf. What's the reason? Means unavailability of carbon dioxide. So this is an important, very important experiment, that is Moll's half-leaf experiment. And then coming to another important experiment, that is the hydrilla plant. Hydrilla plant, experiment with the hydrilla plant. And what's the aim of this experiment? The aim of this experiment is proving that there is the liberation of oxygen. Oxygen is liberated. The aim, oxygen is liberated during photosynthesis. This is the aim of this experiment, during photosynthesis. So that's the aim of this experiment. And you know the requirements. And after observation, you take a funnel, you have a big beaker, and then in this beaker you take a funnel. The wide end of the funnel is kept inverted, You have a funnel like this. All these things after reopening we can conduct it in the lab. So here the hydrilla plant experiment, what we were discussing about, you have a beaker and then the funnel is put in the inverted condition and then insert twigs of hydrilla plant. Hydrilla plant twigs are inserted into the funnel and this entire setup is put in water. So here you have water. And on top of this open end of the funnel, carefully you have to place another, you have to put another beaker. A beaker, you have to put a beaker on the open end. And after this entire apparatus is kept in sunlight, you'll see that the bubbles are rising from the open end of the funnel. You'll see the rising of bubbles, and here there will be the accumulation of gas. And you know that slowly you have to remember this test tube, placing your thumb at the end of the test tube. And when after you remove the test tube, its mouth should be closed with your thumb. You have to close the test tube. The mouth of the test tube will be closed with your thumb. And now here you will introduce a burning splinter at the mouth of the test tube, and when you remove the thumb, the gas that is accumulated here will be sent out and the flame will burn brightly. So this is a universal test for the which gas, for the oxygen gas. So from this you can inference, you can write that the gas that is liberated from the hydrilla twigs is it's nothing but oxygen. That's we have seen in the end products. There is the liberation of oxygen. That's one of the end product of photosynthesis. So the hydrilla plant experiment is for this, and you have seen the experiment to show the importance of light in the photosynthesis. Using a variegated leaf, you can also show the importance of chlorophyll. Children, if you have any doubts, you can make a phone call and ask if you have any doubts in these two lessons. So these are some of the important points of the first lesson, and let's quickly move on to the second lesson. Second lesson is nothing but the energy releasing system, that is the respiratory system. You have learned about the respiratory system, and in respiratory system, this system mainly involves with the liberation of energy. And in our body, the chief organ of the respiratory system is the lungs. We have a pair of lungs in the chest cavity. These are the respiratory organs in the human body. And you have seen in the respiratory system, you have seen that there are two types of respirations. One is the aerobic respiration, aerobic respiration, and another is the anaerobic respiration. So aerobic, this is the type of respiration that takes place in the presence of oxygen, and this is the type of respiration that takes place in the absence of oxygen, anaerobic respiration. This is performed in a very low primitive type of organisms, and in higher organisms the respiration that is performed is aerobic respiration. In the previous classes you have already learned about the differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. The major difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration is also this is one major difference: presence of oxygen and absence of oxygen. The respiration that takes place in the absence of oxygen is anaerobic respiration. And another major difference is the energy that is liberated. Here, if you take in the aerobic respiration, huge amounts of energy is liberated in aerobic respiration, and very little, minimal amount of energy is liberated in the anaerobic respiration. So in this chapter you have also seen an experiment that is conducted to prove the process of anaerobic respiration with yeast cells. You take yeast cells in glucose solution. You put yeast cells in glucose solution, and then you have a delivery tube, and you have lime water at the other end. So you can see the performance. You put grease or oil on top of the glucose solution, so that paraffin wax is put on top of the glucose solution, so that atmospheric oxygen doesn't dissolve in the glucose solution. And after 1 or 2 days, you see that it smells like ethyl alcohol, because each cells have performed anaerobic respiration. So in this respiration, you also know that the muscle cells, they also perform anaerobic respiration, muscle cells. And in the muscle cells, what is the accumulated due to anaerobic respiration? You see in athletes, you do doing the running or any sports, they will be panting, ఎక్కువ రొప్పుతుంటారు దేనికి, so as to take in more and more of oxygen, because the muscle cells also perform anaerobic respiration, and there is the accumulation of lactic acid in their blood, lactic acid, which is responsible for the pains in the muscles, in their muscles. The muscles, they pain a lot, so they stand for a while and they take in as much as oxygen, so that the condition comes back to normal state. There will be the decrease in the concentration of lactic acid. And in the second chapter, you have also seen the another important question is the structure of the mitochondria. What is the mitochondria also called? Since lower classes you have been hearing in the previous class, in 9th class also we have discussed about the mitochondria. What is the mitochondria also called? It's called as the powerhouse of the cell. Powerhouse. I think in 9th class I have shown you a video also, where you can see this mitochondria releasing energy within the cell. That's why it's called as the powerhouse of the cell, the mitochondria. So here in 10th class also you have the structure of mitochondria, because it is one of the main cellular organism, that cellular organelle that is involved in the process of respiration, and lots of energy is liberated through the mitochondria. Lots of energy is liberated through the mitochondria, and then heat is liberated during respiration. That's an important experiment that you have learned in this second chapter. And you have also learned about the mechanism of mechanism, how what are the main structures that are involved in the mechanism of respiration, how respiration takes place. The ribs and the diaphragm, they play a key role in the process of respiration. So that involves the mechanism of respiration. So now let's move on to the next important chapter. So as you know, children, right from the time when we wake up to that until the time when we sleep, we require so many things. కొన్ని మీరు చెప్పగలరా? అంటే పొద్దున్న లేచినప్పటి నుండి రాత్రి మళ్ళీ until we go to bed, we make use of so many things. Let's say like a soap or a milk, toothbrush, so many things we make use of. How do you think we get all these things, all our necessities, all what we require? Suppose now you are making use of a book, you have a pen in your hand, all these things, where do they come from? Yes, you are right, they are manufactured in the factories, and then they come to you. How do they come? You don't go to the factory, you don't go to the place where they are being produced. That's impossible. So there will be somewhere, these products that we make use daily, the production will be somewhere in the metropolitan cities. So for everything we don't go to the metropolitan cities. Then how is it that we are acquiring all these things that we make use of? Very good. How is it done? That is through the transport system. Transport system, this is very important. Transport system, even in the outer world. So these things that we are making use of daily in our daily life, where I told you they are being produced in the factories somewhere in the metropolitan cities. After they are being produced, they will be sent to the main capitals of various states, and from those capitals they'll be, through distributors, they will be sent to the district headquarters, these things. and from district headquarters they'll be sent to various mandals, and in the mandal again someone will be there, some who will distribute them to the petty shops that are nearby to our houses. So every day whatever we want, we go to that small shops that are present by near our home. So somewhere from metropolitan cities, a pen or a soap or whatever things that we make use of, they come to the shops that are near to our house, so that we can simply go by walk and then we can purchase those things. So this is all due to the system, that is transport system. Sometimes if you see the lorries, when they go on strike, there is a lot of chaos, and there is a lot of disturbance in the daily life of people. So that transport system, how it is important in the outer world, in the same way it is, the transport system is highly important inside our inside the human body. Transport system is that important. Just like how it is important in the outer world, within the human body also transportation is that important. So what is that? What's that system that does this transportation of various materials across the human body? That is what is the circulatory system. The circulatory system. So imagine, children, our body is a very complex body. This is a mysterious wonder, you can say, the human body. The human body is something that its secrets are not revealed even up to now. Even the science has developed so much, but still there is a lot of things that are meant unfolded or unveiled. The human body is a wonderful machine, you can say, and whose secrets are not revealed till date. So we know so much, but there is still a lot to be known about the human body. So if you take the human body, we belong to multicellular category. That is, our body is very complex, and it's made up of an innumerable number of cells. Innumerable number of cells are present within our body. So we are multicellular organisms, and there are so many cells, and every cell requires the basic components. That is, every cell requires oxygen. Every cell requires the digested food for the sake of energy. Energy is required by every cell. Oxygen is required by every cell. And from every cell, carbon dioxide has to be sent out. And from every cell, the metabolic wastes, they have to be sent out. So all these things require a particular system. All these things require a particular system, because every cell is not near to a particular system in the body. If you take digestive system, what the digestive system does is, it converts the complex food materials into their simplest forms. The complex food materials, the complex food is converted into its simplest form. That is what is done in the digestive system. It's come into the simplest form. I think you understand. If you take carbohydrates carbohydrates are converted into glucose in the digestive system. Proteins are converted into amino acids. They are converted into amino acids. And fats, these are the things that we eat during our meals, and they are converted into these simplest forms. Fats, lipids, fatty acids and lipids, they are converted into fatty acids plus lipids. So this is what is done in the process of digestion. That is, complex food is converted into its simplest form. The carbohydrates, representation of carbohydrates in our meal is rice. Rice is converted into glucose, and dal that we eat is a representation of proteins. It is converted into amino acids, and the oil that is used is the representation of fats, and this is converted into lipids and fatty acids. So the food in these forms cannot be absorbed by the blood. Food has to be converted into these forms. Now it will be absorbed into the blood. So children, as time is not there, tomorrow I'll continue this class. So you just imagine what are the important, or what are the chief organs of the circulatory system. You think it over. So in what way in our body the circulation of these things, of these vital, of these important materials, how it takes place, how you just think it over, and we'll continue this in the tomorrow's class. And okay, thank you. Have a nice day.